You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Phil, welcome to the Final Say.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
Phil, first of all, thank you for what you've taken up here. John and I have a business that's involved in this realm, and it's important that all companies that currently exist in this area are able to freely operate and not have to face any further kind of regulation or what will come down the road through government control. I could see taxes. Who knows what will be that will eventually turn it upside down and turn it into everything else that the government's gotten their hands on. But you guys have done an incredible job of, one, rounding up an incredibly large amount of signatures and support for standing up. You also have a victory here, and I'd like you to tell us about that.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. First of all, taxes are guaranteed because if they actually reclassify the Internet as a telecommunication service and turn it into a public utility, the Universal Service Fund fee, they call it a fee, it's really a tax that applies to your phone bill now. That would automatically apply to your broadband Internet bill as well. That's presently a 16.1% tax, which, by the way, is up from 9.5% when Obama took office. So it's gone from 9.5% to 16%. It's probably going to 18% next year, and he wants to apply it to your Internet bill as well as your phone bill. So it is, the taxes do come with the regulations. Yeah, it's pretty interesting what happened. They put out this proposal. Basically they asked the public, should we regulate the Internet? The FCC put this out. And the liberal groups did this big coordinated effort. They had Move On and Free Press and the Sierra Club and 24 other liberal groups. They all did this big collaborative effort. And, in the first comment round, they put in like 1 million comments or something like that. I think it was less than that, but they put in a lot of comments. And then, the media everywhere starts trumpeting 99% of the American people want the FCC to regulate the Internet. It's an uprising democracy. They demand it. It's on in all the newspapers, overwhelming. So I said, you know what? The only reason the comments all said to regulate the Internet is only liberal groups were doing this. So I said, there was a reply comment round following the initial comment round, and I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together an effort and try to reach out to every conservative I can reach, and we're going to do the exact same thing they did. We're going to have our form set up, and we're going to put comments in, but we're going to say the opposite. Don't mess with the Internet. Leave it alone. Let's keep it an unregulated free market, and what have you. And so for the second round, we sort of did the exact same thing they did, and lo and behold, the liberal Sunlight Foundation that does docket analysis, they were the source that all the media used for that 99% want regulation in the first round. This week they came out with their docket analysis for the second round, and they said 60% of the comments were opposed to regulating the Internet. So our side won pretty easily. I think the word landslide was used, which, I didn't mind. And as soon as we won, this is amazing to me, as soon as we won, the liberal groups and the FCC themselves start coming up with all these excuses about how, the FCC comment system is very antiquated and it must have lost some comments and, that can't be right and there must have been mistakes and the data must have been of a poor quality, and they have all these excuses. The liberal group said, no, actually we had a lot more than the numbers we had previously announced, and, there must be some mistake. There's no way we lost those. It's the most hilarious sort of excuse-making and sour grapes and so forth that I've ever seen. And my other favorite response from some of the liberal media is, the same liberal media that was touting, that first round, how this means they've got to regulate. Now I'm starting to see these headlines about, it doesn't matter what the comment count was. It should be on the merits anyway. It shouldn't be a popularity contest, which is actually true, by the way. But, it's the exact opposite of what they were saying when it was just the liberals who had the field to themselves. And so I think we've thrown a huge wrench into this. And the other thing that I just find hysterical about this is, there've been several articles written about how the FCC staff were working hand in glove with these liberal groups to make it as easy as possible for them to get their comments in the docket. And we never asked for or received any special help. We just, posted them through the same system that's available to anyone in the public. And then suddenly they're saying, it was just too hard for the liberal groups to get their comments in. And it's like, give me a break, guys. Enough of your dopey excuses. The American people are pretty happy with the unregulated, untaxed internet. The idea that micromanaging every aspect of it bureaucratically would somehow be better than the way that it's been, sort of on the hands-off policy that we've had, is absurd. It doesn't appeal to anyone except the most hardcore of hardcore liberal ideologues, and we beat them at their own game, and now they suddenly want to say the game's not legitimate. The other thing I found funny about this coverage is, when they do this click-to-comment stuff, and they have forms set up to make it easy for their people, it's this wonderful exercise in democratic engagement, all this kind of thing. When we do it, it's like we're a shadowy group, and we did AstroTurf, and we tricked people, and all this. It's like it's not how it works. We do the exact same technique as them. You really can't smear us for doing it and praise them. It doesn't work that way. So it's been an entertaining last couple of days since this Sunlight Foundation analysis came out. And, I don't know if it's going to convince the chairman, Tom Wheeler, not to go forward with this plan, but I do think we kind of embarrassed the White House, which said almost all of the 4 million comments said we need to regulate the internet. Well, it turns out not. It turns out the majority in the second round when we were involved actually said not to. And so we've deprived them of their PR slogans and their marketing language. They may go ahead and try to do it anyway, but we've deprived them of the way that they were planning to pitch it and explain it. And so we'll see what happens in the next couple months if they actually try to move forward. Our big focus right now on this issue is to get Congress to step in and preempt them and to take this issue back into the in the legislative realm where it should be. If there's going to be action on this or not, it shouldn't be bureaucrats at the FCC who decide. And so we've got a petition we're running right now on AmericanCommitment.org urging Congress to step in and stop the FCC from doing this, and that's going to be a major focus as far as over the next couple months.
Well, it's funny, you just covered about everything I was going to ask you, but I definitely agree with you, except for I think the White House does a pretty good job of embarrassing themselves, except for you guys definitely handed them one.
Well, I mean, I tweet after this analysis came out. I put a tweet. I wrote, hey, at Barack Obama, I found this mistake on your website. You should correct it. And then I did a screen grab of him saying that there were 4 million comments saying to regulate the internet.
That's pretty funny. I actually think this is one that the Congress, I know they have so many things that they have to work on, but this is one that they should and probably will take up, and especially now that we control both houses, although I'm not going to say yet that common sense controls both houses because I'm not exactly thrilled with leadership. But here's the challenge, though.
If they did what I would prefer, which is they just basically pass a one-line bill that says you can't do this, leave it alone, Obama would veto that. And it'd be very hard for them to get that passed unless they could attach it to a major must-pass vehicle of some kind or other. So it seems more likely at this point that what they're going to do is try to broker some kind of a compromise deal that will give FCC some authority to regulate the internet without turning it into a public utility. They're talking about creating a new title under the Telecom Act that would, give authority to regulate broadband internet, and it's a pretty tricky path to go down. How much regulation are we willing to accept to avoid total regulation, if you get what I'm saying? I don't really know how you work a deal like that where you get Democrats on board and the White House willing to sign it, but it's actually something everyone can live with. And so that's, I think, the exercise that they're going to try to do up there. It's very tough. Yeah, I don't know how you can really open the door and prevent Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we could all agree on this, that, it's so slippery. It's sort of like when you're down at the jetties and when the water is out and they're dry, it's the stuff you can walk on, and the minute the water comes in, it's instant, like stepping on jelly. You just slip right in. So I'm a fan of eliminating it altogether, as you pointed out, Phil. But I think part of this is a communications problem. The Republicans here, and conservatives, I should say, in general, need to do a much better job of presenting, because the left did a good job of talking about, as they always do, unfairness. But what the right has to point out is it's already unfair. People like Google and Yahoo already necessarily have their own fast lanes into the Internet. So it's a kind of a misnomer from day one. But I want to also tie this to something we've discussed many times before, which is so much of communism, socialism, and everything that embodies Obama is an innovation killer. You spoke eloquently, Phil, about the taxes and the regulation, but I want to tie this in to a terrific piece you had out today in AmericanCommitment.org about fixing Medicare's perverse funding formula, and simply by making the intro of saying, look, I think for fixing many of the problems that we have, the Internet needs to be unregulated, because I look at it as kind of an infinite digital erector set. And if you keep it unregulated, you will foster all kinds of incredible innovation, which has so many positive side effects. If you heavily regulate it, it's going to be like every other failed bureaucracy we have, and you're going to chase away and stifle so much of that innovation. So, Phil, with that being said, I want to transition to and ask you, in your article you just put out today, Fixing Medicare's Perverse Funding Formula, what is so perverse about that current funding formula?
Medicaid. You misspoke there. You said Medicare. Here's the thing a lot of people don't realize. The way that the funding formula for Medicaid in Obamacare got written was a totally unintentional result of one of the corrupt backroom deals that they cut. And in particular, Ben Nelson from Nebraska was saying, I'm not voting for this bill if it costs the state of Nebraska any money. Is basically what he said. And because they needed every Democratic vote, they put in the infamous Cornhusker kickback that had 100% funding just for the state of Nebraska for the Medicaid expansion. And Obamacare Medicaid expansion, for people who are not familiar with it, these are the provisions in Obamacare that expand the Medicaid program, which traditionally had been for disabled people and children, poor children. Expands it to working age, able-bodied adults. And so it's pretty controversial to do that for obvious reasons. That's one of the central provisions of Obamacare. It's actually the biggest coverage expansion provision of Obamacare, much more than the exchanges, people who are part of this Medicaid expansion. But what happened was so Ben Nelson got busted, basically, and people said this is a dirty deal. Nebraska gets 100% funding. No other state does. You're trying to buy his vote. And what Ben Nelson did is he said, no, you don't understand. They wrote Nebraska in there just as a placeholder to remind them that I was the one who wanted it, but it wasn't really supposed to just be for Nebraska, and we're going to, in the final bill, it's going to be expanded to all 50 states. And so I think that was a total lie. But that ended up being what they did, and so they did this for all 50 states. They said basically, for the expansion population, which is working age adults, the federal government, federal taxpayers will pay 100% of the cost of Medicaid. But for the old Medicaid population that was already covered, which is people who are disabled and poor children, people, the truly needy, it's going to stay at an average of 57% federal funding. So the state has to come up with 43% federal funding. This is a totally indefensible policy. This makes absolutely no sense as a policy. It basically tells states, look, if you want to save money in your Medicaid program, sign up as many working age adults as you possibly can, childless adults that are working age as you possibly can, because the feds will give you all the money for that, and cut benefits for the truly needy, for poor children and for people who are disabled. So it's an insane, perverse incentive that makes absolutely no sense. In fact, it makes so little sense that even Barack Obama, in his 2013 budget, he put out a proposal to fix this. He said there should be a single matching rate for each state. We shouldn't have this 100% for working age adults in the expansion population, 57% for the truly needy. We should just have a single matching rate. And it should be a blended rate somewhere in between, and we shouldn't have this bizarre incentive. But then the Medicaid expansion got struck down at the Supreme Court. And instead of being mandatory for all 50 states, they said states can decide whether they want to do it or not. And Obama basically withdrew his proposal. And it was a purely political calculation. He said, you know what, I want as many states as possible to do this Medicaid expansion, to add able-bodied childless adults to the Medicaid rolls. If the federal government's picking up 100% of the cost of that, it'll be hard for states to say no, because we'll tell them it's free money, and we'll beat up Republicans for refusing free money because they hate health care or whatever. And so they made this political calculation, and the result of that political calculation is we have this bizarre, perverse incentive where states are basically told, you'll be rewarded if you sign up as many able-bodied childless adults as possible, and you'll be punished if you focus your Medicaid program on poor children and the disabled, the truly needy. And so it's this totally bizarre, indefensible, in my view, situation. And this ought to be something we could get done on a bipartisan basis. Say, look, we're going to fix it. States could decide whether they want to do the Medicaid expansion or not, but the states that do decide to do it should get the same match rate that they get for the existing Medicaid population. It shouldn't be this absurd 100% federal funding for people who are obviously less needy than the existing Medicaid population. And so that's pretty high on my list of things that I think the new Congress should try to accomplish. And I can't wait to see Democrats explain, number one, why they're opposed to an idea that came out of a Barack Obama budget, and number two, why they really think it's appropriate to tell states, we'll give you more federal funding for able-bodied, working-age, childless adults than we will for poor children and the disabled.
Phil, before Brett closes out with you, I got to connect the first and the second segments as we're discussing here, because it strikes me listening to you that this one-size-fits-all, heavy central government, crush federalism mentality. Look at how we have a new Surgeon General, for example, who seemed to have been handpicked, among other things, because of the desire to go against guns. And you could see how this whole thing, and we saw this with all the highway funding, where you literally, when the federal government controls the purse string, the states literally and financially almost have no potential, just for under financial duress, they have to acquiesce and do whatever the federal government wants for the most part. And that's what scares me about excessive regulation of the feds in any of these locations, healthcare, communications, et cetera.
I think that's right. I mean, look, I think the more that we decentralize authority, the better the outcomes that we're going to get. And, frankly, I would be happy if Medicaid had zero federal funding and states just decided on their own how much money they wanted to raise from their own taxes and spend on health care for the poor and the needy. I think we'd have a much better system than all the various different federal match rates and the different federal requirements and so forth, which just creates a maze of bureaucracy and all kinds of nonsense and perverse incentives and cross incentives and so forth. And so, I definitely agree with you on that. And I think the idea of the sort of the underlying philosophy behind so much of what's coming from the liberal left is they really think that they're smarter than all the rest of us, and they could make these decisions for us better than we can make them for ourselves. And they think that state legislators are stupid, and they think that local governments are stupid, and they think that businesses are stupid, and they think consumers are stupid, and they think that if they're brilliant technocrats and bureaucrats and Harvard professors and elites and Washington insiders can make as many decisions as possible for all of us, that we'll actually be better off. I mean, they think they're helping us out, and of course, experience has shown that it's just the opposite, that you can never substitute the judgment of a small group of elites for millions of people making their own free decisions. And they should have learned the lesson of history, but it's what Hayek called the fatal conceit. Every generation of central planners thinks the problem with central planning is that the previous attempts just weren't clever enough. But these are the guys who can make it all work, and that's why we continue to see these sort of grand plans out of Washington in every single one of these policy areas.
To prove your point, Gruber, the wonderful MIT economist, his statement on how he thought about the American public and how brilliant we were, when he was asked a question by the media, and also during the questioning on his hearing by Congress, they asked him, when you had that audience, did anyone come up to you and say, I was offended by what you said? And he said, no, I don't recall that. So it tells you that his entire audience was probably on board with everything he said. It goes to your point. They don't have a respect for the American people, and they think that, they're going to just do what they want to do. And we don't have time to get into all this, but I think we've seen what to expect at least for the next 2 years, and that's a lot of executive action, whether you call it a memo or whatnot. This president's going to do everything he could possibly do. Most of it will be bad, and we're going to spend a very long time fighting all of it.
I think that's right. But, I'm reasonably optimistic that we're going to get some things done in the next couple of years. And, The very first thing they're going to do in the House, by the way, the week of January 5th, they're going to pass the Keystone Bill again. And, people need to be on top of that and sending letters into Congress, because we need to try to get to that veto-proof number. And we've got a decent shot at actually overriding Obama on that, because there's such widespread support for it. And by the way, we've got an article about this up on our website. Just because oil prices are down doesn't mean we don't need to build the Keystone Pipeline, because they're not going to stay down forever. And because that oil is going to be produced one way or another, it ought to go into a pipeline. And so, we've got a lot of policy areas where we can make headway and have some victories even while Obama's still in office. And at the very least, if he's going to do his own terrible things anyway, we got to make sure people understand that that's where the Democratic Party is, and that there are going to be consequences for that.
Well, Phil, we commend you on your efforts to help bring these ideas and to distill it to something where people can understand it and take action upon it. And for those who want to take action, if you could, Phil, real quick, give the one or two places where people can find more information about yourself as a free market advocate.
AmericanCommitment.org is the website. The main action item right on the front is what we were talking about earlier, telling Congress to step in and stop the FCC on regulating the Internet. We also have our Action Center there, which has some other action items, and I think there's one on Keystone there as well. And if you sign up any of our action items, we'll also automatically get you on our email list, and you can stay up to date on all the stuff we're working on.
So one last thing before you run. I did notice the president's comment that he said, but by the way, this Keystone Pipeline won't create a lot of jobs, and we have to understand its impact on the environment. Well, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're going to move oil from Canada anyway, and we're going to use trains, what do trains run on, and what impact does that have on the environment? And isn't that worse than what happens in a pipeline?
The official final State Department environmental impact statement, which was issued when Hillary Clinton was running the State Department, by the way, found that approving the pipeline would reduce greenhouse gas emissions 28 to 42% compared to the no-action scenarios. And that's because the no-action scenarios have transport by other means, either by ship in tankers or by rail, both of which are considerably more expensive and more emissions intensive than moving by pipeline. And so if the president were telling the truth that he's going to make this decision based on the global warming impact, which was the standard that he laid out before that environmental impact statement came out, that would be a reason to say yes, not a reason to say no to it. And so it's really just about the anti-economic development, sort of economic growth mentality of some of these radical greens, and sort of the symbolism of it more than it's about the actual global warming impact.
Phil, we're running up against the end of the show, so I want to wish you an absolute fabulous holidays. Want to remind people to support AmericanCommitment.org. We look forward to seeing you.
There's a donate button on there, too, if anyone is moved to try to support our work financially. That would be great, too.
Absolutely. We highly encourage them to do so. So, again, happy holidays, and we'll catch up with you in the coming weeks in the new year. Keep up the good work. Thank you again.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.